Our reason, incorrigibly presumptuous, imagines itself possessed, by right of birth or by right of conquest, innate or acquired, of all the essential elements of the knowledge of truth. Even where it confesses that it does not know the object presented to it, it believes that its ignorance consists only in not knowing which one of its time-honored categories suits the new object. In what drawer ready to open shall we put it? In what garment already cut out shall we clothe it? Is it this or that or the other thing, and this and that and the other thing are always something already conceived, already known. The idea that for a new object we might have to create a new concept, perhaps a new method of thinking, is deeply repugnant to us. The history of philosophy is there, however, and shows us the eternal conflict of systems, the impossibility of satisfactorily getting the real into the ready-made garments of our ready-made concepts, the necessity of making to measure. But rather than go to this extremity, our reason prefers to announce once and for all, with a proud modesty, that it has to do only with the relative, and that the absolute is not its province. This preliminary declaration enables it to apply its habitual method of thought without any scruple, and thus, under pretense that it does not touch the absolute, to make absolute judgments upon everything. Plato was the first to set up the theory that to know the real consists in finding its idea, that is to say, in forcing it into a pre-existing frame already at our disposal, as if we implicitly possessed universal knowledge, but this belief is natural to the human intellect, always engaged as it is in determining under what form or heading it shall catalogue any new object. And it may be said that, in a certain sense, we are all born Platonists. Nowhere is the inadequacy of this method so obvious as in theories of life. If, in evolving in the direction of the vertebrates in general, of man and intellect in particular, life has had to abandon by the way of many elements incompatible with this particular mode of organization and consign them, as we shall show, to other lines of development. It is the totality of these elements that we must find again and rejoin to the intellect proper, in order to grasp the true nature of vital activity. And we shall probably be aided in this by the fringe of vague intuition that surrounds our distinct, that is, intellectual, representation. For what can this useless fringe be, if not that part of the evolving principle which has not shrunk to the peculiar form of our organization, but has settled around it unasked for, unwanted? It is there, accordingly, that we must look for hints to expand the intellectual form of our thought. From there shall we derive the impetus necessary to lift us above ourselves. The form and idea of the whole of life cannot consist in combining simple ideas that have been left behind in us by life itself in the course of its evolution. How could the part be equivalent to the whole, the content to the container, a byproduct of the vital operation to the operation itself? Such, however, is our illusion when we define the evolution of life as a passage from the homogeneous to the heterogeneous, or by any other concept obtained by putting fragments of intellect side by side. We place ourselves in one of the points where evolution comes to a head, the principal one, no doubt, but not the only one. And there we do not even take all we find, for of the intellect we keep only one or two of the concepts by which it expresses itself. And it is this part of a part that we declare representative of the whole, of something indeed which goes beyond the concrete whole. I mean of the evolution movement, of which this whole is only the present stage. The truth is that is to represent this, the entire intellect would not be too much, nay, it would not be enough. It would be necessary to add to it what we find in every other terminal point of evolution, and these diverse and divergent elements must be considered as so many extracts which are, or at least which were, in their humblest form, mutually complementary. Only then might we have an inkling of the real nature of the evolution movement, and even then we should fail to grasp it completely, for we should still be dealing only with the evolved, which is a result, and not with evolution itself, which is the act by which the result is obtained. Such is the philosophy of life to which we are leading up. It claims to transcend both mechanism and finalism, but as we announced at the beginning, it is nearer to the second doctrine than the first. It will not be amiss to dwell on this point and show more precisely how far this philosophy of life resembles finalism and wherein it is different. Like radical finalism, although in a vaguer form, our philosophy represents the organized world as a harmonious whole. But this harmony is far from being as perfect as it has claimed to be. It admits of much discord, because each species, each individual even, retains only a certain impetus from the universal, vital impulsion, and tends to use this energy in its own interest. In this consists adaptation. The species and the individual thus think only of themselves, whence arises a possible conflict with other forms of life. Harmony therefore does not exist in fact, it exists rather in principle. I mean that the original impetus is a common impetus, and the higher we ascend the stream of life, the more do diverse tendencies appear complementary to each other. Thus the wind at a street corner divides into diverging currents which are all one and the same gust. Harmony, or rather, complementarity, is revealed only in the mass, in tendencies rather than in states. Especially, and this is the point on which finalism has been most seriously mistaken, harmony is rather behind us than before. It is due to an identity of impulsion, and not to a common aspiration. It would be futile to try to assign to life an end. In the human sense of the word, to speak of an end is to think of a pre-existing model which has only to be realized. It is to suppose, therefore, that all is given, and that the future can be read in the present. It is to believe that life, in its movement and in its entirety, goes to work like our intellect, which is only a motionless and fragmentary view of life, and which naturally takes its stand outside of time. Life, on the contrary, progresses and endures in time. Of course, when once the road has been traveled, we can glance over it, mark its direction, note this in psychological terms, and speak as if there had been pursuit of an end. Thus shall we speak ourselves, but of the road which was going to be traveled, the human mind could have nothing to say, for the road has been created pari passu with the act of traveling over it, being nothing but the direction of this act itself. At every instant, then, evolution must admit of a psychological interpretation which is, from our point of view, the best interpretation, but this explanation is neither value nor even significance except retrospectively. Never could the finalistic interpretation, such as we shall propose it, be taken for an anticipation of the future. It is a particular mode of viewing the past in the light of the present. In short, the classic conception of finality postulates at once too much and too little. It is both too wide and too narrow. In explaining life by intellect, it limits too much the meaning of life. Intellect, such at least as we find it in ourselves, has been fashioned by evolution during the course of progress. It is cut out of something larger, or rather, it is only the projection necessarily on a plane of a reality that possesses both relief and depth. It is this more comprehensive reality that true finalism ought to reconstruct, or rather, if possible, embrace in one view. But on the other hand, just because it goes beyond intellect, the faculty of connecting the same with the same, of perceiving and also of producing repetitions, this reality is undoubtedly creative, that is, productive of effects in which it expands and transcends its own being. These effects were therefore not given in it in advance, and so it could not take them for ends, although, when once produced, they admit of a rational interpretation, like that of the manufactured article that has reproduced a model. In short, the theory of final causes does not go far enough when it confines itself to ascribing some intelligence to nature. And it goes too far when it supposes a pre-existence of the future, in the present, in the form of idea. And the second theory, which sins by excess, is the outcome of the first, which sins by defect. In place of intellect proper, must be substituted the more comprehensive reality of which intellect is only the contraction. The future then appears as expanding the present. It was not, therefore, contained in the present in the form of a represented end. And yet, once realized, it will explain the present as much as the present explains it, and even more. It must be viewed as an end as much as, and more than, a result. Our intellect has a right to consider the future abstractly from its habitual point of view, being itself, an abstract view of the cause of its own being.